All right, there's a picture of the U.S. Army Museum, which I visited about a week ago and also made a post about. And let's just get started here. Um, I want to talk about, following up on the previous video, about what happens if we did wind up with authoritarian governments. There's a lot of talk about what happens, particularly if Trump wins the election. And we seem to be, as I said, we seem to be losing our grip on liberalism from both the left and the right. So I wanted to talk about both, how things can go wrong on both sides. And so let me bring up, first of all, just that's the list of my books again. Some of this is a little bit more like about the third book. There's this little booklet called Our Fundamental Rights is Not POD. I'd have to print more copies of it. That's from 2000, but most of this is based on the first book. So let me go to my script here, and I'll just also run. I'm going to give these to you in the notes, the links to them. Um, an article about Steve Bannon and renunciation of individualism, and then an article about Viktor Orban, and this is actually an article about how Orban said that he wasn't talking about his own ego, but the way Fareed Zakaria had posted it. It doesn't look like this article stayed in my cache. I have to, yeah, it was Fareed Zakaria had posted an article in the Washington Post, the 22nd, where he talked a lot about how liberalism was running its course, even in people's minds. They felt like people needed to belong to things bigger than themselves, and that there was almost too much freedom, that people sort of needed some sort of purification. That people needed more direction, so they had more community, more family, and more purpose, and that people were losing their sense of purpose. Of course, that was what we talked about in the last previous video about social media. Um, so let So both the right and the left have answers to this. I just showed you, and I'll give you the links to those articles. Um, but um, Zakaria particularly talked about mentioned the fact that Trump had invited Viktor Orban to his to Mar-a-Lago, I guess, and kind of saw Orban and the prime minister of Hungary, or is he the president? I'm not sure of the title, as the um, kind of the role model for how to be a strong man, and how to maintain stability and order, particularly when you have problems like immigration and a lot of crime and people getting away with crime because they don't have anything to lose and this kind of thing, how to restore law and order. It's also this right wing idea is something you would want when you think the world is a zero sum game and your nationality, your country, your people, your race, your religion, whatever, may be the only one left standing if there's not, because of global warming or because of war or uh, running out of resources, of overshooting. They call that overshooting now. We run out of resources, that countries will be fighting each other just like they used to, and it's important to be loyal to the ethnicity or the tribe that you belong to. So your behavior, the ethics of your behavior, depend on supporting what you belong to rather than supporting yourself. And Zakaria quoted Orban as talking about that idea that people should have goals other than just their own. But then when you look at the Orban article, it's really only talking about himself. But let's just go through the ideas that, and I grew up with this in the 1950s. I was born in 1943, but men and women are presumed to have basic duties to form a family and within a family. And men are expected to, because they're generally stronger and more athletic, to be willing to protect women and children. And men um, are a little more fungible than women because there are more sperms than I guess than there are eggs, and eggs carry a lot more information, mitochondrial information, and so forth. And women are maybe you could have parthenogenesis and just get by with women or something like that film Children of Men in 2006. Maybe you could. I don't think so. Then you would have only one sex. But that was the way it was when I was growing up. You were expected to prove you could do the things men had to do for women, and before you had a right to enjoy sex. So it wasn't so much that it is true that there was a concern if you got a girl in trouble, then you had to raise the baby. You're responsible for the baby. That was one thing. But the real thing is that the real idea was that it was wrong to enjoy sex until you're ready to get married and have children and raise children and take responsibility for having to depend on you. Just like was done for you, that it was wrong to experience sexuality at all without the intention of raising the children that you could have from them. That was, of course, that used to be the old Catholic idea. And other religions, of course, have variations of this idea and have very rigid roles for the sexes. We all know about Islam and so forth, and know about Iran, and we know about uh, strict, evangelical Christianity and strict Catholicism, strict Judaism for that matter. The conservative branches of all religions seem to believe this. Um, or I should have said, huh, shouldn't say for men, it should say for men. I'll fix that right while I'm talking. Um, but so men, in this view of things, the ability to take the risk that you might be the sacrifice and to have to go to war to protect your family was something it was implicit in growing up as a man. And for women, it used to be a lot riskier to be pregnant and to have babies and a couple centuries ago than it is now. But that sort of counterbalanced the risk of pregnancy for women. It used to be. Of course, that's changed a lot. Um, but this was very much about stepping up to duty when you were called upon to do so, and that was more true in a zero-sum game and everything. Yet when I was growing up, the emphasis was on preparation for being a professional, for having a better life, and then you needed, because of the Cold War, you needed all the math, you needed all the scientists and mathematicians you could get to win the Cold War with the Soviet Union. That was the mentality. This was the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62 and so forth. That, um, so um, preparing yourself became more important than socialization, including dating girls and being prepared to support a family because you're a man, because that started taking a second fiddle to it. In the 1960s, this idea of morality, even after my expulsion in 1961, it gradually got better. When I was in the dorm again in 1966 and 67 in graduate school, it was a lot. It wasn't as bad. It was a lot better. And then, of course, we had Stonewall in 1969 after the civil rights movement in the mid 60s. And things got much better in the 70s. And the general idea was that many people believed adults should be able to have sex in private and do what they want as long as the other adults were consenting, which is I believe, and most of us believe in that. Um, as long as they took responsibility, if it was heterosexual for the babies they had, women should have a right to have, people should have a right to contraception, though. That was Griswold versus Connecticut in 1962. And then over the years, we had battles over sodomy laws. We lost Hardwick versus Bowers in 1986, but then in 2003, Lawrence versus Texas, we finally got sodomy laws declared unconstitutional. In the meantime, in the mid '80s, we had the horrible scare of AIDS, which decimated a whole generation of gay men. I never got infected, but it raised public health questions about gay men, particularly. However, a few decades later, COVID would be exactly the opposite. People in large families were more, which was the socially responsible thing to be way to be living, were more vulnerable because COVID was very contagious with casual contact, and ironically, gay adults, particularly men, did very well during that period because they tended to live in smaller households and were well educated and everything. And who knows, maybe PrEP actually was a little bit effective in preventing infections. I have a feeling it was, actually. And that I won't get on too much about. Yeah, the left was very hard. We'll get to the left, and it was very authoritarian on the lockdowns and on the vaccines. And I got vaccinated, and it worked for me. But I think we could have done more with some of the other medications than we did. I think we could have been more aggressive with a couple of the other opportunities that were out there than we were to find to get to find effective treatment sooner than we did. But that's just my opinion. Another mistake there. Um, but anyway, getting back, I think to Orban, and Orban is very much preaches about family values and the importance of family being the center of your life and all that kind of thing, and having something bigger than yourself and having your country and all this. Of course, Putin has jumped on this too, and so have other authoritarian leaders in parts of the world. And of course, it's very bad in Africa. It's actually in Hungary, first of all, does not have a draft for one thing. And Hungary also, it doesn't allow gay marriage or gay adoption for all intents and purposes, but it does allow gays to have their own normal private lives and does protect them from discrimination. It does not allow it to be talked about in public in places that children can see. And so that would be another thing that, when Project 2025, the concern about what would happen if Republicans win in the election this fall, if Trump wins, particularly what's going to happen. One of the things that it could be very difficult it might be that that practically all websites have to have age verification, maybe with the blockchain or something. Um, that was, the idea of doing that, of requiring that was struck down back in 2007 when the Child Online Protection Act was litigated, when I was part of that litigation, as under Electronic Frontier Fund. But we might have to go back and look at it. But there would be an attempt, and conservative societies on the right want to keep any information about gender nonconformity away from minors because they feel it discourages their getting married and having children, which is what happened in Russia with the 2003 anti-gay propaganda law. Now, this was true even before trans became the issue that has become more recently, and gender identity. This was true even just for homosexuality. Um, looks like I really couldn't type here. But anyway, the I grew up under this paradigm, this right wing paradigm. and I thought had relative freedom. Um, Family was kind of an afterthought, and I kind of lived in a don't ask, don't tell world as a civilian throughout the 80s and 90s. And I had more spending money because I didn't have a family to support. So I was paid about the same, but I did more night call without being paid for it. I did night call when family members had problems. I sometimes had to do it without being paid for it. But in general, I had more money because I didn't have as many debts. I didn't have to have as big a house or have to spend money on children. So I was often economically better off. And that's the way it was until the period after 9/11, really. Then it started to change. Now, let me just also talk about kind of the left wing paradigm, which is about the oppressor versus oppressed. And and the most important thing value to the left is allyship and comradeship. Um, and they have a very strange the radical left has a very strange attitude about individualism because it seems like the demands on the trend, about gender identity and so forth are for youth are very individualistic, but it's very short-sighted. And what the real concern is that they claim that gender nonconforming youth are another marginalized group, which, I was gender nonconforming and I was teased. And my problem was probably the measles back in 1950. I don't think mine had anything to do with gender, but I know what they're talking about. And so they think that, first of all, the medicalization is one thing. They want the support for gender affirming care. But the other thing is they want the social support of everybody using pronouns in business, not every cis people using pronouns to show more inclusivity. And that has rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And when you and if you complain about it, you can get in trouble. You can lose your job, or might even lose financial services. Colin Wright did with PayPal. If you complain about something like that, they demand, they're sort of demanding something that you join an effort to make things better for an oppressed group. And I mean, because they want someone like me to see myself as a member of an oppressed group, which was gender nonconformist, which was in the past, or they want LGBTQ SR to be one oppressed group that's loyal to each other rather than to be broken into pieces by self-interest. Although you can certainly see that transitioning gay children or pressuring gay youth into considering social transitioning, or youth that might grow up to be gay, could be seen as anti-gay, and that could be a threat, and that could be something that a future dystopian communist um, government could try to do. So anyway, it kind of all of this kind of leaves me in a position. I've been able to speak and be heard a lot because I had wealth accumulated and I had inheritance and so forth. So I've been I've been able to do all my own critical thinking, and so I resent very much being expected to join something. Um, when I feel like if you are forced to join a mass movement, you don't have an individuality left to say, which was kind of Steve Bannon's point. That a lot of people that are joining MAGA just want to renounce their individuality in order to find something better for the church or something. When you join something, whether you join that mass movement on the right or it's on the left, you kind of don't have an individuality left to say. And then you lose your own purposes. And I can't very well join these other things to raise money for this or that, or call people, or be part of some social, um, movement in order to put pressure on other people to liberate the oppressed or something. I can't really fulfill that role reasonably given the background I have. So, but I do feel like I'm sort of living under a dome. My ability to speak the way I have can run out of time. I'm 80 years old, and that, I might sort of even my own spiritual salvation might not be okay to try to protect it with this dome. That's kind of Under the Dome, the Stephen King novel, or The Wall, that film that in 2012, that Austrian film. That's kind of what I feel right now. But that's what I wanted to talk about with authoritarianism. Is that the biggest point is that the left is demanding you be loyal to oppressed groups, even when the people are making mistakes, and even when you feel that as individuals they're not to be looked up to, because it does glorify victimhood, and it does feel that people that are systemically disadvantaged shouldn't be held to the same standards as the rest of us. And it does feel that we need to be willing to bond with them, and that we shouldn't think we're above being expected to do that. And even when we're right about something and they're wrong, it still feels that we have to be loyal to the idea of saving the oppressed. And they sort of don't tolerate that being questioned. So that's the authoritarian on the left. But I will talk about my own speech activities and book selling and blogging and sort of the twist in my history of that pretty soon. That'll be a video pretty soon. But I do thank you for listening to this.